Hey, Trey, thanks for being on the show.
Man, Jay, I am so happy to be here. Love what you do, love what you teach. Excited to just share my perspective on my life and my career in this season.
I'm really excited to have you here because, you and I are going to have a lot of similarities, I think. You can have a history with marketing agency work and kind of running your own business. And currently you are serving as executive marketing director for Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace division, which is a huge piece of the puzzle. And Dave has had a big influence on my life, especially through the EntreLeadership material. So excited to talk about all kind of stuff business today that I think is really going to help people. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, so let's jump in at the beginning of this. And what I want to do is you have chosen to make a transition at some point in life where you at some point had an agency kind of similar to mine. And then you moved into the role that you're in now, working in a larger company, even though Dave would say he's a small business. He's getting a little bigger than that, which is awesome. So what has that transition been like? Because I feel like there might be a lot of people right now that are looking at transitions one way or the other through this season that we're in.
The transition for me has been probably one of the greatest growth periods in my life. People assume that if you're leading a team, you're responsible for payroll, that if you're responsible for paying all the bills, driving the business, that growth is something that you're hungry for, that naturally comes to you all the time. And what I found out in the 8 years of owning an agency is that the things that I was naturally good at, I was really good at. And the things that I wasn't naturally good at, I had a real hard time getting good at them. And I just made the decision, especially after having a young family, which I know family is a huge value to you as well, big value to me. Having a young family, that agency life, that it's always on, it's never off, kind of set up the extra stress of having 40 other families I was responsible for all the time. Finding out that I wasn't all that great at the P&L side of business leadership. I was really good at the strategic thinking, the people development, the creative side of actually crafting marketing campaigns. And so it just made sense with us. We have a special needs child. My wife had spent a lot of time in the early years of his life going to all the therapies without me. I was always trying to build the business. It just made sense for us to make a pivot a few years ago to get something a little more stable. There's some great agencies out there that are super stable, but one where I could put my 45 or 50 in every week and then go home and put the other 200 in that really matter more and try and be as focused as possible. It's something I'm still working on, Jay. It's hard when you've been an entrepreneur to really go to the whole you can turn it off thing. But my leadership here is really starting to lean on me, particularly in the last 6 to 9 months, about having an off switch. Family is more important than this. It's time for you to really practice what you said you came here to do instead of just being a builder and a doer all the time. So it was strictly about me getting to a place where I could operate in my strengths 100% of the time and not have to be worried about continuing to up-level my weaknesses because I felt that dependency weight coming on me of all the other people I was responsible for. And the interesting thing is here, I'm actually responsible in some ways for even more than I was there, but I'm able to focus really in on the things that come very natural to me. So it doesn't really feel like work most days.
What I love about what you're saying right now is it reminds me a lot, and I don't know who said this originally. I think it might have been Stephen Covey. I could be wrong. Is the idea of that, what you're saying, which is focus on your strengths. I always say, if you were like a 2 out of 10 in something and you work really hard on it and now you're a 4, you're still pretty bad.
That's right.
But if you're a 7 on something and you work really hard at it, now you're a 10. Well, now you have something really special going on. And I think that idea of putting yourself in a place where you can look around and go, hey, I'm able to focus on what I'm best and highly suited for. And all these other people who have different skill sets than me, they can focus on what they're best and highly suited for. And that's the definition of like an amazing team, I think.
Yeah, my personal mentor is one of my most favorite napkin quotes I've ever had slid across the table to me in my life. But his name's Gideon. He's just a personal friend, kind of a no-name guy in the hospitality arena who we met at a conference. He knew that I had a background in ministry prior to getting into agency work. He was a recent person of faith. He really wanted somebody to walk him through scripture, and he knew I needed somebody to walk me through business. So we kind of had this great ebb and flow relationship where we were mentoring each other per se. But one of the things that Gideon said to me early on was, first become a specialist, then become a generalist so that you can become a capitalist. And what he meant by that was, like, early on, identify what your real strengths are and go deep in those, get really good at them. Become a generalist in how you add complementary skills to those things that you were gifted or talented with that the good Lord above gave you, so that you can broaden your ability, your lexicon of language, be able to understand more about business. But then that also helps you really fully understand how to capitalize on opportunities within your strengths when you're able to navigate what you're not good at as well as what you are good at. And that's been one of my 2 or 3 kind of cornerstone mindset phrases that I've lived by for much of my last 15 years in the professional world, of where are my capitalizing opportunities? And they're not necessarily always financial. People hear that word capitalism, they think financial. Sometimes it's people, sometimes it's seasons. And it's more about having an eyes wide open to what you're gifted to do, like what you're put on this earth to do. And it's a really special place to live from, like the fullness of embracing your strengths and being okay with your weaknesses and capitalizing on the right opportunities because of that mindset.
That's really, really good. I love that idea of become a specialist first, then a generalist, then a capitalist. And I think back on my own journey, and I think I see a lot of that. I'm not sure I had the right framework for it. And that's why I love doing these conversations, because, if I had some of these frameworks for thinking through this stuff when I was running my business when I was 22, I probably would have moved a little bit faster than I did. Now, I'm a big believer in slow growth anyway, but I think it's just great for people to have that idea of, like, what are you specializing in so that you can become generalist, so that you can become a capitalist. Yeah. And like you said, it's not all about money. I mean, I remember, I'd probably been in business 8 or 9 years at this point, and I'd probably never taken a real vacation, like disconnected from work. Everything was on my back. I started hiring people. I didn't know what I was doing. And one of my big goals one season was, I want to be able to put the company in a place where I could take a whole week off, not answer my phone, not reply to a text message, not check my email, and things just survive without me. And it wasn't about the money. It was about the time. I think a lot of people start a business or even try and get a new job in order to not just get money, but get money, get time, get freedom, and ultimately live the life they want to live. And I think we make such a mistake of trying to put all these things in silos of, like, all right, my work thing's over here, and my kids are over here, and my wife's over here. And I always say it's not a balanced scale. It's more like a blender. You just throw things in, and some days you need a little bit more spinach, and sometimes you need a little bit more sugar,
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the largest currency that we have as human beings that we get to be in charge of is our attention. And there are so many things in this world that compete for that attention. I was reading a case study the other day just about that Facebook, as an example, for the last 12 to 14 months had really been hitting some inventory thresholds where the news feed was getting tapped out from an advertising standpoint because attention had been fully capitalized on. And here we are in the last 6 weeks, and attention is through the roof because people are home, they're on their devices more. So inventory availability has gone up. Costs have been suppressed in some markets. And I start to think about that in our own life. It's like, what am I doing to make sure that my attention is locked in on the right things so that I'm not getting it like there's not a land grab going on for my attention, that I'm the one that's in charge of what I give my attention to and what is my hierarchy that's in my life at all times when it comes to faith, family, and work, and trying to keep that in order at all time. And it's hard. We are naturally going to give 8 to 9 hours a day of our attention to work. It doesn't matter what you do. Like, that's just what's going to be. And you're going to give 7 to 9 hours a day of your attention to sleep. And so it's that other third, that other 8 hours of time where you have to really decide what's going to get your attention so that that's sort of like your investment window into the future of your life on a daily basis. People think your work is your investment. No, I would submit it's that other 8 hours that you're awake every day with. What are you doing to invest in yourself from an attention? What are you doing to invest in your kids and your spouse? What are you doing to invest in your spiritual life? For me personally, the big attention deficit that I identified in my life this year, about to be 37 years old, my father had quadruple bypass surgery at 35. I lived most of my young adult life thinking I wasn't going to make it past 35, so it didn't really matter. It's a really poor psychological thing that I had going on. And then I turned 36 last year in September, and it was like, I made it. But, what am I supposed to do about this? And I was super heavy. I'm pushing 400 pounds, just working this desk job for the last decade, never really tried to take care of myself. And I've lost 57 pounds since November.
Wow.
About thank you very much, about number one, taking no days off, about making sure that I'm doing at least 60 minutes of that 8 hours that's not accounted for sleep or for work, dedicated to getting my heart rate up, sweating every day. Atomic Habits, read that book. James Clear, I believe, is the author. The podcast on Entree earlier this year, brilliant. That's exactly like where I was focused on this. Is instead of thinking about I want to be a certain weight, I just started thinking about I'm going to be the person that gives an hour of my attention every day to physical fitness. And I just have focused on that. And it's been so eye-opening, and it started to make me challenge, okay, I've got 7 left. What am I doing with the other 7 now? How can I start to be intentional? And if my wife were on the call right now, she would tell you I still got room to grow, but at least I have more awareness about the totality of my personhood at this point in my life than I did at any point before this. And I think being able to get to the point where you can back up for a week and know that the train's not coming off the tracks the way that you did is because of the seeds that you sowed for the 6 months or 12 months or 18 months before that, to be able to almost will that into your atmosphere, like into making it happen for you, instead of just being like, it might happen, it may not. So I super value that approach, and that was something that you worked towards.
Gosh, so much stuff there that I think is worth unpacking, and I don't want people to miss. Number one, that Atomic Habits book by James Clear is absolutely spectacular. He uses a lot of science and real information about why and how we do things, and how you can get rid of bad habits and form good habits, and just spectacular. I actually need to go back and reread it again, I feel like. But I want to hit a couple of things that you talked about and unpack them a little bit more. The first is going to be like how you find that focus, and then how you kind of force yourself into it. The second is going to be how you found those strengths, because you said, hey, I discovered I need to focus on my strengths. But some people are out there going, I'm not even really sure what my strengths are. Like, how do I find those? Let's talk about that. And then what I want to start with here is actually seems unrelated, but I'm just interested, so that's where I'm going to go, is about ministry. So you mentioned you'd been in ministry. Ironically, I actually really a couple of years ago felt like I was being called to be in ministry, and had a real season of like soul searching of like, am I supposed to quit this thing and start a church and be a pastor? And what am I supposed to do here? And I even had the opportunity to preach quite a few times at our local church, which is amazing. And really believe that's what I was supposed to do. And I had another business owner really challenge me, and he said, why do you think that you have to be in ministry to be in ministry?
Amen.
And I was like, both.
Yeah.
He's like, don't you realize that because your title does not have the word pastor in it, you have a greater influence on the opportunity to speak into other people's lives and faith? I was like, oh, yeah, right. Okay. Whoa. And it really kind of reset me. So I'm curious, like, what that transition was like for you from like ministry world, business world. Where's that overlap? How do you kind of see those things?
Man, it's crazy, Jay. One of my former colleagues in the ministry world said the very same exact sentence to me. He had said, what makes you think you got to have pastor to be in ministry? Jesus didn't say go into the church. He said go into the world.
That's
and
right.
So, and that was kind of a big unlock for me. For me, ministry was always just that thing I thought I was supposed to do. Just kind of grew up in the church, grew up always connected to the church, went to Liberty University, went to Liberty Seminary, got a seminary degree. Like, I was just kind of always on that path because I just believed any good Baptist was supposed to go into ministry. It was kind of just in me. And so when I got into ministry, I did it for 4 full years. I was on staff at a church that was a large church that also owned a private school as a part of the church's ministry. So I had a dual role as young adults pastor and head of the Bible program for the school. And so I ended up coaching football, coached baseball, played football myself kind of through the years coming up. So there's a lot of good things in that. But there was also a lot of just dissatisfaction in my own heart most days, feeling like I had settled for what seemed to be the easy road for me instead of really trying to lean in and challenge what it was God actually wanted for me. I had kind of landed on what I felt like the church wanted for me. And I was stuck warring through all these emotions and dissatisfaction. And the recession happened 08 and 09. And my wife was a middle school teacher at the school. I was high school. And, with the recession and some other events that happened, the school just ended up getting a little underwhelmed from an attendance standpoint, and they had to make some cuts. And so we ended up being ones where our jobs weren't there anymore. And the pastor's side of it wasn't enough financially to support us. And so my hand was sort of forced into really finding out, okay, I just spent 4.5 years in education. What are the strengths that I took from this that I actually have to offer to the general marketplace now, not just to education, but just general marketplace. And I realized that I enjoyed making super complex subjects easy to understand. That's the heart of a teacher, which is something that the Lord had gifted in me. I enjoyed the idea of vision casting and looking to the future. And I really love like witty, catchy wordsmithing. It's kind of like an unknown fact about me. I've been a spoken word poet since I was 13. I still do it now in my mid-30s. I love it. We had a battle of the bands here every year at Ramsey, and last year I surprised everybody and came out and did 3 hip-hop songs, and people didn't think. And, it's just one of those things. It's like one of my eccentric qualities. But so kind of like copywriting, complex subjects into simple to understand things, and it kind of just came together with like, why don't I try out running internet ads? Like, why don't I try out some of this stuff, sort of doing story brand-esque stuff before story brand was really a thing with Donald Miller? Not that I'm trying to take credit for it, but that sort of thinking about mental calories. And so I ended up landing on my strength out of a necessity of figuring out how to provide for myself and my wife in that season. And it forced me to be hyper-focused because, buddy, we went from an okay income to zero income real fast. And my wife looked at me and said, hey, look, if there was something you wanted to go and take a risk on, we ain't got anything else to lose at this point. So you might as well go and take a risk right now. And I will tell you that the freedom to the whole idea of not being able to be a minister without being in ministry, and then having the freedom of my wife supporting me to say, you can go take a risk right now. Like, it's okay. The crazy thing was, man, in the side of 12 months, I'd raised $250,000 and started my own marketing agency just off of some small short-term wins, proving that I had the ability to get in there and do it, building some internet funnels. I'd done some affiliate marketing stuff on ClickFunnels and things like that stuff. Those of us in the space understand, shown some early wins, got my first couple of clients to let me do it for them. And then we were off to the races. And now here we are almost 11 years later. And I've been really super fortunate to see some of those capitalist opportunities come my way because of being willing to step out and keep a strong focus. But on the strengths thing, I really had to, it was 3 things that helped me identify my strengths. It was thinking about the things that bring me joy. Like, where does my heart really lean in and go, man, I love doing this. It was, what do strengths finders say about me? Because I love strengths finders. And then once you get into that and you identify it always gives you your top 5. If you really lean in on your top 2 or 3 and you actually read the excerpts about people that have those skills, what should they be doing? Most of the time when I do that interaction with people, I find out that it's right. Like, it's pretty close to some things you need to be doing. And then the third thing I would say is I read a book by John Maxwell, who's one of my favorite human beings on the planet, called Failing Forward, that talks a lot about, the people that only are really truly failures are the ones who just stop learning. Like, that's the only way you can actually fail. And so I've kept a posture over this decade or so of being the best learner in the room at all times, no matter what the title on the door was when you came in my office. Like, I want to be consistent in learning into my strengths, not learning outside all other stuff. I want to be a generalist and conversationally, but I want to be like crazy good at my strengths, because your strengths are going to be the thing that ends up paying the bills. And most of the time people find out when you operate in your strengths, you create overflow that can end up paying the bills for others, which is what comes down to business ownership, leading big teams, things of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's some really powerful stuff. I think it's really important. And for anybody that's not familiar with that, there's a book called Strength Finders that Trey was referencing. When you buy that book, it gives you like an online
Yeah.
quiz. You can take the quiz. It gives you all your stuff. So that's a really helpful tool, I think, especially for people that may be struggling with uncertainty over where their strengths really are. It is a great way to do that. And I love what you said about finding joy too, and even your wife giving you permission. I mean, this is so relevant in the midst of what we're all going through right now in this crazy virus thing, especially relevant for people that are watching this on Facebook real time, or people may watch it shortly after because I don't know when the podcast will actually air. But, you know, there's going to be a lot of transition for a lot of people. I mean, the last numbers I saw were close to 30 million people.
Well, it's a one in five right now, isn't it, Jay? 1 in 5 have lost their
have
jobs.
lost their jobs in the last really month or two. I mean, the spike is worse than anything we've ever experienced as a country, certainly in our lifetime, and really much before that. And yet, you know, I love the question that Michael Hyatt asks a lot, which is basically, what does this make possible? And I think when we step back, and it's so hard to do when you're in the midst of real suffering, because there are some people out there right now that really are in the midst of some really serious pain, whether it's health or financial or whatever, or just fear. I think the spirit of fear is a real problem right now, and we need a spirit of hope. And what you're talking about there of finding joy in the midst of that is so important, because what I always say to people, not to get too preachy, but happiness is a result of our happenings. What's happening around us often results in our happiness or not, but joy isn't dependent on that. And what are those things that can bring us joy? What are those things that that we just feel called out to, and this might be that season for somebody that's watching right now or listening, that they go, you know what, I'm going to try that thing, a thing that I've always wanted to do. I'm going to take a step towards it. Because even those people that have good jobs right now, but want to kind of maybe do some side things or something on the weekends, there's a little more time in everybody's schedule because we're not on airplanes. We're not out at events. There's a lot of things that we have more freedom to do. And so what does this season make possible? I just love that question.
Shameful plug for a Ramsey product. If anyone is on the fence about making a move or changing it, one of my most favorite things that I've seen come out, and not only the time I've been at Ramsey, but even in the last 10 years, is proximity principle by Ken Coleman, that talks about that very thing, about how do you make the difference from going where you are to where you want to be. So it's a cheap book. If anybody can't afford it because of this season, just have them connect with me. I'll make sure they get a copy. But it's a great read for somebody that's really thinking about taking that step. And you're right. I mean, happiness is temporary. Joy is eternal. And happiness happens externally to you. Joy is something that comes in here, and you really can feel it. I know for me, when I write a great ad, even today, I don't get to write ads all that much anymore, because of just the way it's gone for me.
Sure.
But man, when I get some time to just sit down and map out an ad or a campaign, man, I love it. I love it so much. And so it's one of those things, like, I'll joking around and do it on the side, just outside where I got to be careful because family is still more valuable. Yeah. But I'll find myself off daydreaming about some cool campaign that I saw and how I could make it, take some learn from it and bring it to our business but yeah, man, I love what you're talking about. Joy to me is a critical part of this. We were literally in the food stamps line. That's a part that I didn't know if I was going to share or not. We were in the food stamps line when my wife made that statement to me. Wow. So man, you couldn't get any lower than we were. But what we have found is like, as we got closer to God, as we became more dependent on him, we are people of faith, that he just, by finding ourselves full in him, he made my strengths compound. We always look for compound interest. I think there's two things you get compound interest on: your finances, if you invest it right, and your strengths, if you invest it right. And it's like, and I would say maybe even a third thing, your attention, kind of going back to something I said earlier, like there's certain things that have compounding interest in your life. And it's in those things that you can really start to up level yourself. And you look up, and a year later, you're like, wow, I don't even recognize this person that I am today compared to who I was. Like I'm getting so much traction in so many areas of my life because of this intense focus that I had on certain things like joy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious because I've never experienced this. I've never worked for a big company, a really Well, I did one time when I was 16. That was just a brief thing. As I'm curious for you, what the transition's been like of kind of running and caring for a team at a larger company like Ramsey Solutions versus, running and caring for a team at a smaller agency like mine potentially. Like, what has that kind of been like? I mean, people are people, but the structure's a little different. So talk about
Yeah.
that, the team structure and team care.
Yeah, so I have to use the vernacular that John Maxwell uses to kind of talk about levels of leadership. He says there's 5 levels. The first level is permission, or position. Excuse me. Somebody gives you a title, therefore you're a leader because you have a title. The second is permission. People actually give you their permission to lead them. The third one is production. People follow you because you get stuff done. I lived there for a decade. I just was going to be the number one producer in the room. I felt the onus of making sure I hit budget for all the other people that were responsible. I wanted all the chips on my shoulders at all times, and that's the way I was. But that's really only the third tier, and there's a lot of people, a lot of small business owners especially, that get to that tier, and they only are able to get to 2 million, 3 million, 4 million a year in revenue because they haven't moved to the next level, which is people development. It's when you get past production to developing producers that you can actually start to experience scale. You could take a week off from your business and it doesn't skip a beat because you got some delegation happening. And then the fifth one that he talks about after that is pinnacle. It's where you've kind of moved into, I think about the folks over at Belay and the way that they've been able to run their business, and now their podcast, Own Not Run. They own it, but they're not operating it. They've moved so much to the pinnacle that they're able to have multiple businesses now if they want to. And I think in my side, it's not multiple businesses is on this side, it's multiple teams. Like being able to raise up leaders and get leaders to that people development level. What I've been able to learn and really been pushed into doing here at Ramsey in this seat is I ultimately have 4 teams with 4 team leads. So I am developing the 4 team leads, and then those team leads are developing down underneath them. So it's all about not hierarchy or structure for structure's sake, but more from a development stake, like the way that the organization grows here. Ramsey is easily the greatest personal development organization I've ever been a part of. We invest so much in our team members here. Obviously, we have the Entre Leadership brand at our disposal. Everyone here goes through Entre Leadership University, which is incredible. In and of itself, we get things like all access that we get permission to use. We get to go to the events like Summit or Master Series, things I know you've attended in the past. So we get to cheat a little bit because of what we're connected to. But, for me, that was the biggest transition. Is moving here required me to push past going from level 3 to going to level 4 in that leadership framework. It was the only way I was going to be able to serve my team well here, serve my leaders well here. And ultimately, what's been super awesome for me is it's freed me up. It's freed me up to be able to be, when I'm with one of my 4 that I'm directly responsible for leading, they're in very different places from each other. So it's stretching that muscle in me, because what I'm working with on one, I'm not working with on another. So it's forcing me to kind of still do some of those generalist things that I talked about earlier, because some of the problem spots that I have with team members come supernatural to me. Others are not things that are supernatural to me, but I still have to help and lead them. So it's actually forcing my own growth too. That's why I said it's been probably the greatest 2 years of personal growth for me, because of the way that setup is.
Yeah, gosh, that stuff is so hard to get right. I mean, that's definitely been one of the biggest areas that I've struggled with, is realizing that I can't just open the laptop and do the work. I can't. That's not my job anymore. I have to be willing to let other people fail, just not fail catastrophically. I even tell the team sometimes, I say, my job almost primarily is to create an environment in which you are allowed to fail, learn from it, and grow, and just not fail catastrophically. Not that we want to create a bunch of failure around here. We're all about winning, not about losing. But at the same time, there is something in that. I think a lot of people don't grow because they're so afraid of fear, and they don't have, or so afraid of failure, and they don't have somebody around them to nurture them. I remember when we created our leadership team here, at Design Extensions, I had never had a leadership team before. I'm a sole owner, and I've just always bared all that weight. But we're finally getting to a size where I go, okay, I can't have all these people direct reporting to me. This doesn't work. It's not. I can't care well for everybody. And I just started putting titles on people, to be completely honest, based on their production level, what they were getting done, what areas they kind of were in control of, where they had created processes. And this was a couple months ago, I basically apologized to those guys I put on my leadership team, because I said, what I didn't do is I gave you these titles and I didn't prepare you for what real leadership is. Because leadership has a cost. And as much as I so often just want to be one of the team, you don't get that anymore at a certain level. And that's okay, right? Like when Dave Ramsey walks into a room, he can say all day long that he just wants to be one of the team. He doesn't say that anyway, but he's not, and he never will be. And that's okay, because somebody has to help encourage and bring other people along. One of my favorite things that I'm loving right now, that I've been sharing with a lot of people, is I believe, and it relates to what you're talking about, I believe everybody needs somebody to look up to, somebody that they're striving to learn from and grow from. I think everybody needs somebody standing beside them. They need a peer that's kind of operating in the same life cycle as them, kind of across the board. They need somebody who's looking up to them, somebody they're pouring into and teaching, regardless of what level they're at. I don't care if they're fresh out of college. There's somebody that they can pour into and teach and help grow. And then they need somebody that believes in them when they don't believe in themselves.
Amen.
I mean, that's ultimately, that's your wife in the food stamp line going, hey, like, what's your dream? Where do you find joy? Where do you want to go? Go do it. Like, that is exceptional power. And I'm sure it has been for you.
Yeah, man, it's I find that you and I are pretty cut from the same cloth. I don't say it that same way. I actually like the way you just said that better. But I always challenge people, like, who's your mentor, who's your colleague, who's your mentee. Like, you should have this 360-degree perspective in your life at all times about how you're trying to, where your blind spots are. Because if you have somebody on all those levels, somebody's going to see a blind spot from one of those angles, and it's going to help you out. And back to the point you were making about putting titles on some of your team earlier, one of the greatest and most freeing things I believe a leader, ultimately the senior most leader, can do in any kind of org structure is to take all the blame and give all the credit. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's hard for us. I don't know what you're on the Enneagram. I'm a 3. Losing's hard for me. You get it. It's hard for you. We'll find the silver lining in any situation and make a loss a win if we can. But the older I get, the more healthy in my 3-ness. I get it honest. My name means 3. I'm Trey. I'm the healthier I get in accepting what my weaknesses are, being a 3, my hardwire, the more gracious that I find myself being with where I wing, which I wing to a 4. So I'll suppress my emotions and put that big chested kind of rah, we can do it all day long, but be super frustrated underneath. And it really took having healthy understanding of my hardwiring and be able to lead in and just say, you know what, it's one thing for me to say I'm going to take all the blame and give all the credit, but man, I'm about to go practice this thing for a year. Every time somebody comes up and wants to high five Trey, I'm going to look the high five in the face and say, you need to direct that high five over there to team member A, team member B, team member C. And the second I see the bus saw coming, I'm going to take somebody and go, whoop, and step in and go, no, that was my decision. That was my decision. And I've been really trying to, and I tell you what, man, you start flexing that muscle, it starts making you find out if you're happy or joyful when all the arrows start coming to you. And I've had good days and bad days with it, but I think that's a critical part of leadership development and living that out in front of those people that either they have titles or they've earned titles, to show them what the next level up of where they need to go from there looks like, is whenever they can start to fully embody some of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really encouraged by my own team the other day at our Monday morning staff meeting. We have all staff meetings on Monday mornings. And one of the things we started doing, which is kind of fun, we just do kind of a sporadic, hey, who's somebody from last week that, was really helpful for you, or you saw do something really positive or align with the core value. And we just kind of jump around and let people kind of share those things. And our leadership team had sent kind of these baskets out to the team members because everybody's working from home. and kind of just some little treats and things. It was kind of a surprise last week. So everybody was kind of excited about that. And one of the guys on the leadership team kind of got credit for it. And everybody was like, oh, I'm so thankful for you for doing that, because I was the one that said he had sent it out because he had. And he immediately said, well, I appreciate that, but really it was so-and-so's idea. It wasn't mine. And I thought, yes,
Hey, awesome.
that's it. Like, that's it. Because he could have been like, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it was great, blah, blah, and just let it and owned all of the credit for it. And instead he goes, actually, you know what, that was so-and-so's idea. All I did was place the orders and put the credit card number in.
That's great.
And that was really encouraging me. I think that's exactly what you're saying, is finding those moments where you can pass off that praise to somebody else. As a leader, that has exceptional power. And I just think that's huge.
Yeah, I think it's you want to Dave. One of my most favorite things Dave says, and one of the greatest principles that he instills in us here, and he does a great job of embodying himself, is that business moves at the speed of trust. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the quickest ways to build trust with somebody is let them catch praise that you maybe you should or shouldn't have gotten, but You're going to make sure they do get it, and that they're going to get it with one or two of their peers around as well, so that their own reputation isn't just better with you, it's better with some other key relationships in their life. And I think I will say, I think that dynamic is true no matter if you got 15 people in your team or 1,000. Like, there is a way to put that into practice as a great leader, to just have your eyes open to the situation as it's happening. And there's also, great wisdom in leadership that when it's not praise, that you're making sure you're respecting the dynamic in that situation and trying your best to not do it when 2 or 3 of their peers are around, understanding that those two situations aren't necessarily created equal all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that stuff. We probably could talk all day, but there's a couple things I always like to cover, and I don't want to miss them. So I'm going to transition a little bit. I always like to ask this question, and it's around work-life balance. Now, that word means something different to everybody. I personally don't even love the term, but it's what everybody kind of associates with. You know what it means. So, number one, what does work-life balance mean to you? And number two, we talked about it a little bit, but let's really narrow down onto it. How has that changed for you in different seasons of life, and what does it look like today?
Yeah, so work-life balance for me means that your attention is in deficit in a certain direction, too bad one way or the other. That if you look at those 3 blocks of 8, like I talked about earlier, that middle section of 8, you're really doing the best to balance that section, because the other 2 are just fundamental pieces of life that we are responsible for doing: sleeping and working, earning for our family. So I will say, though, from a super vulnerable state, I shared one of the mental kind of frameworks that I live by in most of my adult life regarding my health and my weight earlier in the talk. Another one that I think was there kind of always underpinning my decisions was that it was impossible for me to be a great husband, a great father, and a great worker all at the same time. Like, I think there was this lie that I believed for most of my life, I would say up until even as recently as, the last 6 months, that I needed to pick and choose which of those things I could be great at, that I couldn't be great at all 3 of them at the same time. There wasn't enough time in the day. And so I defaulted, coming from that food stamps line mentality, I defaulted to a long time to being great at work, because I didn't want that to ever happen to me again. And we haven't had to live with that intensity for 5 years, Jay, but I still have. I still have. I've still carried that I'm on all the time mentality, and I haven't had to be. Yeah. And so my wife, in all of her graciousness, has done a really great job of bringing me along here recently. Our move to Franklin, this move to Ramsey, was a catalyst in that direction of like, hey, we can start to tone this thing down. We can really focus on the fact that your kids are getting older. You don't have to travel as much as you get it with agency life. I traveled a lot all the time. Don't have to travel with this job all that much. The biggest thing is I have the freedom to leave my laptop at work. I didn't leave my laptop at work for 9 years. Yeah. It went with me all the time, but I don't have to take it home. Are there good days and bad days with that? There are. Yeah. But my wife has gotten, this is powerful, she has gotten the freedom from my leaders at our office to call me out if I'm working on it, and to tell them that my work-life balance is off, so that they can hold me accountable to it, and say, don't do that anymore. Like if If it was important, you would have gotten to it before 5:30. So that means you can get to it at 8:30 tomorrow. Like, it doesn't need to be 8:30 tonight. I've never, because I was the one that was living the mindset of I can only be good at one of these three things, and I was the decision maker at all the two agencies I worked at, that was never an option. But because I've had that decision-making authority taken off of me here and have somebody that's able to lean on me and say, change that behavior, that is not a healthy behavior. That does not align with our core values. Family is one of our top. We have 14, but it's one of the most talked about values that we have here. And it's super important. And so I'm getting better at it. Still not where I want to be, still out of balance a little bit, but I would say that I have more awareness about it than I've ever had. And I'm starting to get more intentionality about what I'm going to do about it in the short term.
Yeah. Here's what's really ironic. You remember earlier before the show, we had a little talk, and I was telling you later today, I'm doing a kind of an abbreviated, signature talk. And the very last lines of my signature talk, which I have on the screen to make sure I can remember them later, are, you see, I believe that you can build a great business and still be a great parent. I believe that you can build a great business and still be a great spouse. I believe you can build a great business and not have to work 100 hours a week and be stressed out and worn out and ready to quit. That's literally the last three lines of my talk, which is almost exactly what you said. And you've not seen that talk, and we've not talked before. So that's pretty crazy, but there it is. I've stopped feeling my stuff.
It's going to be a good talk.
That's right. But what I would add to that too, though, and for you, it has been a major shift. All right, I'm going to put myself in a company where there's a system in place and values in place that are going to also help me be in alignment. But people out there that are running small businesses, like, hear this too. You can leave your laptop at work too. Like, now you might not be able to right now. Let's be really clear, because depending on how your business is structured and what's going on, you might need a season of not doing that so that you can put things in place to make that happen. But for me, early on, it wasn't really early on. It took me like a decade to figure this out. But after I figured this out, I realized, I got to put things in place in order to have that future reality. And back then, for me, it was about, I want the business to be able to survive when I'm not there. Now that vision and mindset has been changed. I told the team last year, my new mindset for this year is I want the business to thrive when I'm not here. I don't want it to survive. I want it to thrive when I'm not here. So this year I'm going to take a whole month off, and I'm going to do my absolute best not touch anything. And we're going to see what happens. And I think it's going to be great. I think I'm going to come back and they're going to be like, can you just go be on stage and be on Zoom calls and not actually touch the physical business and just develop leaders? That'd be great. And that's where I want to be, and that's where I need to be. And so if you're out there listening, you're going, I could never do that. Like, I'm on my phone at 11 o'clock at night and again at 5:30 in the morning. You can do that. You just have to decide, and then you have to ask the question, what has to be true today in order for that to be true tomorrow? But I thought it was so funny that literally the last three lines of my talk that I'm doing in like 2 hours are almost verbatim what you said.
Yeah, and amen. And I think one of the critical unlocks for the people that are filling that laptop weight, 12 hours a day instead of the 8 or 9 that they should, is they haven't fully figured out how to hire for their weaknesses yet. Right. And be able to do and delegate some of that stuff off themselves that they're super inefficient at. So it's making it take what should take 8 hours is taking 12 because they haven't developed the capacity for it, and they're not going to. It's that whole 2 to a 4 thing that you talked about earlier. And that was a critical part I wanted to refer back to that I think would help those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're running out of time. So last two things I want to ask. One is, as you're speaking into the lives of other small business owners or people that may be listening to this or watching this show, what's some advice you'd give them to help them build a business that lasts without sacrificing family? That's number one. And number two, if people want to learn more about you or Dave or the things that you're involved with, where can they find you online? So those are two things I'd love to kind of wrap up.
Yeah, I'd say in order to build a business that lasts, one of the greatest strengths that you got to have is vision. And you will never go where you're supposed to go if you can't see where it is that you are going, and actually being able to set a plan 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, 6 months, 3 months, 30 days. Like, what is that rolling calendar of vision look like for your business so that you can see the end date for when you're taking that hat off of your head and putting it on somebody else? To borrow from E-Myth, the early days of a business, you got to wear all the hats. But when is it? Is it the 3-year mark when you got that spot and the 5-year mark when you have that spot? Like, how are you visioning and almost working towards a specific set of circumstances that have to happen for that to become true. Instead of letting business happen to you, you're starting to have the business. And the second thing I would say is like the power of a great assistant. I had never had an assistant in my life until the last year or so. And man, if you can get the right assistant that you view as an extension of you, not a supplement to you, someone who is more of that generalist type, who is kind of pretty good at a lot of things, someone that can really help keep you accountable. And a lot of small business owners end up having their spouse be that person. And I think that can be a mistake. It just puts in a lot of undue stress on your relationship. So I think vision and having a good EA are critical unlocks for the growth of a business and for building one that's going to last, because the EA can do things like, I know this is cheating, Jay, but scheduling date nights on your calendar for you, reminding you when you should buy something nice for your spouse on the way home, or some things, important dates that you might not normally remember because you're so caught up in it. And if you want to connect with me, you can just find me on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/Trey, TREYSHEN, first four letters of my last name, Sheneman. That's my more preferred. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but that's more my personal stuff. You can go look me up, but LinkedIn for business stuff, and I'm happy to connect. Any kind of help or advice I can be to your followers, your listenership, I'm more than happy to. I have been on both sides of the line, both business owner and now team member, and I think they both have pros and cons. So any other things I can answer, I'd be happy to.
I said those were the last questions, but I actually have one more. There's a poster of a guy looking over your shoulder back there, and he's been staring at us the whole time. Tell me about that poster and what that means to you.
Yeah, Winston Churchill. So he is, he's one of those icons for me in history. You want to talk about somebody that was arguably facing insurmountable odds in their life, and the posture that he took to stare down Nazi Germany and most of the rest of his countrymen in light of that season when he was really leading Britain. And just it wasn't his what so much as it was his how. The guy's how was undeniably unapologetic and brash in a really good way, like from a true, humble, I'm doing this for the right reasons kind of place. And for me, that never give in mentality is not the I'm pushing or I'm challenging just to push or challenge. It's because if I genuinely believe and expect the best for everyone that's around me, why in the world would I ever give up? And so it's just a mentality that I try and be in. I see old Winston every morning. We fist bump before we go about our day. So yeah, that's why that's right there.
That's good encouragement. I think having stuff like that around is really valuable. I'd be remiss if I don't mention this offer to people out there who may not be familiar with it, especially since you're involved with the financial piece side of things. If anybody out there is listening to this and not taken or not gone through the Financial Peace University material, it's some of the best financial curriculum that you could ever do for yourself, for your family. And there's not a more important season to be doing that in. Well,
and it's free. And it's free right now for 14 days.
That's right. It's free for 14 days. Just go to daveramsey.com and you can find that information. Trey, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Awesome, Jay. Brother from another mother, man. We cut from the same cloth. I enjoyed it. Bless you. Good luck on your talk today.
Thanks, man. Hey, I hope this video has helped you with some tips and ideas to build a business that lasts. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on the next videos that we roll out. And more importantly, for some awesome free resources, head over to our website at buildingabusinessthatlasts.com. You can get a free copy of my book there where I tell you how I have built an agency that's grown year over year for the last 20 years in a row. So go grab that, buildingabusinessthatlasts.com, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks. We'll see you soon.